Well, it's wonderful to be here in such distinguished company with old friends, including many distinguished figures from the Vatican, from the Pontifical Academy of Social Science, and old friends from other parts of the world, in particular from China, and also from Australia, and those who are new friends that I'm looking forward to making in the coming days. This could be an historic meeting, I think, I hope. A dialogue between civilizations on the global commons. We're a little bit behind time, so I'll be brief in my remarks, but I wanted to share a few slides. Who are we, that is the Global Foundation, and why are we here as part of this exercise? We are formed from the citizenry, originally in Australia, and it is citizen-led leadership for positive global change. It's that simple. So my board, I'm elected eventually by citizens, and every person in the world could become a citizen member of the Global Foundation if they chose to do so. A very interesting, simple principle. We were founded 25 years ago in Australia with the former heads of state. Business with purpose sets us apart. We involve business leaders who are committed to the global common good, but we work with communities, institutions, governments, and we are faith-enabled. We're not a faith organisation, but we are deliberately faith-enabled. We attract people of consequence for dialogue and impact, free from politics and short-term thinking. I loved what Sister Helen had to say about the method of dialogue, the method of how we talk to each other and listen to each other. And this is really what we are, as a platform for exchange and dialogue. The dialogue between civilizations, this is a continuing journey for us. I'll mention something we did very recently in China, in Beijing, with friends who hosted us here in the room. East and West need to find ways to talk to each other. And I agree with that beautiful quote, that extract from Pope Francis you mentioned, Sister Helen, about avoiding the politics of double standards. We need to be honest and real, and to be ourselves. If we're actually going to change the world, we first need to often change ourselves. World leaders support our vision. It's surprising, in fact, what Jeff just said about extraordinary to the extent to which formal dialogue and formal communication is relatively weak, particularly at present between great powers. But sometimes they will talk to little civic organisations just like ours because they can't talk to each other as easily. I want to thank Cardinal Turkson, who's a dear friend over many years, and Sister Helen Alford as President of the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences, and Professor Ricardo Pozzo and Professor Jeffrey Sachs. Thank you for this opportunity for us to co-host, co-manage, co-moderate this meeting. We convene people globally, most often in Rome. Yes, this is a meeting taking place in the Casina Pia just a few years ago, and I acknowledge Bishop Sanchez Sorondo, former Chancellor of the Academy, for his wonderful support. We also meet around the world, mostly in Rome, but Beijing, Rio de Janeiro, Singapore, Washington, Paris, London, Berlin, Rome, Australia, the Pacific Islands, and Assisi, the home of St. Francis, which I'll mention in a moment. People need reasons to come and talk to each other from different disciplines and with a degree of informality that is sometimes off the record and not binding, because that's where change often happens. Pope Francis himself, I'm sorry the words are a bit small, but in January 2017, Pope Francis received us in an audience here at the Vatican. And briefly he said, "Your motto, together we strive for the global common good." And he supported our idea of globalisation, but one that is cooperative. This is the centrepiece of our work. We need a form of globalisation that works, but is cooperative, that it's fair, inclusive, transformative and prosperous. He mentions the Sustainable Development Goals and how we need to mobilise institutions and others in power. We have no power. We're a body of citizens with some will and ability to connect, but those in power have to make these things happen. And he encouraged us to draw upon the Church's social teaching. And for me, it's been a revelation to see how much the Church's social teaching can help those of us who come from what I would call the so-called secular world. Thank you, Pope Francis. Long may you lead. Assisi, the home of St. Francis, is also our spiritual meeting place. Last year we met there and formed the Assisi Accord, a statement about mobilising on climate change, not the usual suspects about governments do this and government, but we need the private sector, the people with the big money, the investors, who have their hearts and their pockets in the right place to make commitments to make the change. And they put themselves on the line in Assisi. We are going back at the end of this week to plan a second meeting of the Assisi Accord. And we're also going to meet the Franciscan friars who've asked for our help to build a chapel in the woods at the Eremo de Carceri. How beautiful. I mentioned Beijing just 2 months ago. There we were at this round table hosted by colleagues Henry Wong and Mabel Mao, the Centre for China and Globalisation, remaking globalisation and the need for dialogue between civilizations. The Chinese want this. The Chinese are coming out, not just the Chinese, but if we don't have China in the room in our global conversations, we're not having the real conversation. So we insist everywhere we gather that China is part of the conversation, just as other developing and emerging countries should be as well. And then I wanted to mention, just last week I was in Paris. Some of you were also there at the forum convened by French President Emmanuel Macron, with whom we've had some engagement and whom I admire greatly for his leadership over and above what I would call usual political leadership. It was astonishing who he had in that room in the heart of Paris. This was not a formal United Nations meeting. This was not a formal intergovernmental meeting. He brought people together from the leaders from Germany, China, Brazil, Japan, the US, John Kerry and Janet Yellen, Egypt, most of the leaders of Africa, small island states, the brilliant Mia Motley from the Caribbean, institutional heads. In fact, two of my great friends are in that photo, Christine Lagarde, you'll know, and also Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. They are great friends of the Global Foundation. And they and many other friends were together with us in Paris. And they were saying to me, Steve, you're going down to Rome, to the Academy. We want to know about it. We want to be engaged in these conversations that you're involved with the Academy and the Vatican going forward. The incredible convening power of the Vatican under this Pope. So, conclusion is to say the method of what we do is to encourage dialogue, east-west, a dialogue between civilizations. That this meeting is taking place today and tomorrow is both important and potentially historic. We are honoured, we're privileged to be part of this process. We're looking forward to working more closely going forward, perhaps to being back in this place before too long, and also in carrying the messages and the dialogue and the engagement from this room to other parts of the world. Thank you.